Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it is time for one of my favorite videos every set release. And by this point you probably know what that means. It is Commander Top 10 Day for Ravnica Allegiance, which means I'm joined by Tomer. How's it going today, Tomer?
I'm doing well, Seth. I'm always excited for these. It's always a highlight, so yeah.
It's always a lot of fun, and I'm excited for this set. Ravnica, or Guilds of Ravnica, was pretty solid, and I feel like we got a lot of interesting cards from Ravnica Allegiance as well. So that's what we're talking about today. Top 10 Commander cards from Ravnica Allegiance, and we got some sweet options. But before we get into the countdown itself, what do you think of this set, Tomer? How does it compare to Guilds of Ravnica in terms of power level for Commander? And what do you think overall? Good set, bad set, meh type set? What's your opinion on it?
I think it compares really well to Guilds of Ravnica, and in fact, I think this set has the most, I would say, staples, like full-out general staples for Commander that we've seen in, like, years. I would say I would name probably like 3 cards that I would say are going to show up in Commander most decks that can run them pretty well going forward. So that's a huge feat. That's not something we see very often, or I would say very often. Certain archetypes, popular archetypes, got a lot of boosts, and we're going to go over them in the future. But I would say overall, this set has a higher than average concentration of great Commander cards and the highest concentration of like Commander staples that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think every set has stuff for Commander. There's stuff that gets played every set, but it's actually not all that common that you get true staples. Like, if you look at the top 20 cards or 50 cards of each color, they don't really get shaken up all that much from standard legal sets compared to like Commander decks they do and whatnot. But it's really interesting to see some potentially really high-end cards that just, like, if you're playing a certain color or a certain archetype, you're going to play these cards close to like 100% of the time, which is pretty sweet, and makes them exciting to talk about.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
Spoiler alert, the number 1 card on our list, when Tomer sent me his list of the top 10 cards, and again, a usual reminder, this is just Tomer's personal favorite cards, right, Tomer? This isn't like a spiky gonna win. It's a fun list of Tomer's favorite cards, but the number 1 card on the list, it came with parentheses that said something like, oh my god, this is the best card for its color of all time, or something like that. So, you sounded pretty hyped for number 1, but people are gonna have to wait for that. We got 9 more cards to get through before we get to the oh my god card. So
definitely a disclaimer, though. We have to point it out every single time, or else people get upset. This is not like a strict power rating or a power ranking. This is just what I consider the cards that I am most hyped for. That is a list relatively of most hyped for Tomer. This is not like extreme, like this is by far the most competitive card. This is by far the most second most competitive card. So please refrain from the comments of why did you put this at number 1? This should have been number 3. It's like
all right, so with our reminders out of the way, let's jump into our top 10 list, starting with number 10. And I'm actually really excited that you put this card on the list, because I have no idea what to make of this card. Nikia of the Old Ways. So Nikia is a card, when I first saw it, when you first read it, you're like, oh my god, that's unplayable. You can't cast non-creature spells. But then you read the second part and you're like, oh my god, that's busted. It's like a mana flare just for me. How do you use this card, Tomer? Like, how does Nikia work in Commander?
Well, I think the drawback isn't as bad as some people might make it out to be. Obviously, you want to put Nikia, I don't know how to say her name. It's something, I'm going to go with yours, Nikia. So if people get upset, that I could blame
then they
you.
get upset at me, yeah. Good idea.
I think Nikia actually works really well in very creature-focused decks that are going to be having a way higher than average creature count. Decks like Rurik Thar, the Unbowed, is basically, this is an easy auto-include in that type of deck, because Rurik Thar was already heavily punishing for you or anybody running non-creature spells, so those decks are almost entirely creatures already, so Nikia just fits in perfectly with that idea. Animar, Soul of Elements, also heavily incentivizes you for playing creatures, because whenever you play creatures, you put a +1/+1 counter on Animar, and then all your creature spells get that much cheaper based on the number of counters on Animar. So those decks are also super creature heavy. So Nikia, I think, fits very well in those type of archetypes, and I think she also probably plays best as a deck built around her, because if you start building around Nikia herself, then you can start adding ramp that specifically targets land ramp. So cards like Sakura Tribe Elder, Wood Elves, and Farhaven Elf that put lands from your library directly into play become a lot better. Even cards that are untapping target land, like Voyaging Satyr, gets a lot better too, because when you untap a land, you're actually doubling the amount of land that it's going to be producing. So if you actually have Nikia as your commander, there's a lot of really cool ways to build around her and really abuse her ramp potential, and also ways of actually removing her to play your non-creature spells. So for example, Temur Sabertooth, you can activate its ability, just 2 mana, to bounce another creature to give it indestructible. So let's say you have a Genesis Wave in your hand, and you have all this mana. You can generate like 20 plus mana on the battlefield. You can pay 2 mana to use Temur Sabertooth's ability to bounce Nikia back to your hand, and then use the remaining 18 mana to Genesis Wave for, I think it's like 15?
Yeah, it's like
triple
right.
green and an X.
Yeah, math checks out, I think. Yeah. I think it's triple green and X, yeah.
It's a lot. You do it for a lot. So if you actually build an entire deck around her, you can find ways to remove them from the battlefield, to cast her non-creature spells, and also really abuse the ramp potential that she has available to her. So the non-creature spell clause restriction, it's quite heavy, and it's going to really alter your average deck list. But if you build around it, it's not that bad at all, and then you get to use that sweet personal mana flare. So yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, having a mana flare of your own is really powerful. Typically, when we see cards with this ability, it impacts everyone, so just you doubling your mana makes it extremely powerful. And you could do some really explosive things, like if you play this and untap with it, you're untapping and casting like Huge Eldrazi or whatever. You're gonna have like 12 mana just from your lands, and that's not even including any other shenanigans. So you could do some really insane things. My question, so I think it's obviously a really sweet build around Commander, and you can definitely minimize or even eliminate the drawback if you are just playing a Gruul deck, and you're playing a typical, you got Cultivates, Kadama's Reaches, Beast Withins, you know, those type of staples that you would play in a Gruul deck. Do you have any catch of like, I don't know if I should put Nikia in my deck? Is it gonna be too painful? Am I not gonna be able to cast my stuff? Or do you think you can still just kind of cast it, take advantage of the fact that Gruul tends to have a lot of creatures, and trust that it's gonna work out? As a member of your 99, I mean, not as your commander, obviously.
I think so. I think you could basically jam Nikia of the old ways into basically any Gruul deck, because they just so happen, as you said, to be very creature focused, just as a general rule of thumb. As long as you don't have like 20 plus non-creature spells in your deck, you should be absolutely fine to play her. Sure, you might have 1 or 2 cards in your hand at a given time that you won't be able to cast, but you should, if you have a properly constructed deck, you should be able to cast most of the spells that you shouldn't really worry too much about it. And also, she is a 5 mana creature, so she has no built-in protection from removal. So, I mean, at some point she is going to get removed unless you win the game first. And when she does, then you cast your non-creature spells.
I guess that makes, yeah, so you don't have to be like, oh, I have Cultivate and Kadama's Reach in my deck, so I can't play Nikia. Like, that can work out just fine.
Yeah. I think you curve out to her. You know, you play your Cultivating Kadama's Reach, and then you play Nikia, and then you get, you also get double the value out of your Kadama's Reach and Cultivate, because your lands are tapping for essentially double mana.
All right, let's move on. Number 9 on our list, we have Tomer's cheat slide number 1. We don't have just one card. We got a bunch of cards. It's kind of a tradition. Gates matter. We have some new Gates matter stuff. Yeah. Open the Gates, Gates Ablaze, Plaza Harmony. So Tomer, how good or possible with these new additions is Gates matter in Commander?
I think the deck is really good, but I've always had really conflicted feelings about the Gates deck, because I personally owned a physical copy of a Maze's End deck. Maze's End is basically when you have like 10 or more guild gates on the battlefield, you can activate Maze's End and just win the game. It's an alternate win condition.
They also have to all have different names, right? You have to have all 10 guild gates, basically, not just any 10. Okay. Yeah.
That is correct. So, yeah, you have to assemble Gatron, basically.
like super mega Gatron.
Yeah, mega Gatron, and then you win the game. It's a fun alternate win condition. It's a powerful deck too, because you kind of build like a Lands Matter deck, and I ran it under Child of Alara, so basically it was a lands deck. I could wipe all non-land permanents at any given time with Sacrifice Outlet and Recursion Engines. Really powerful deck, really fun and unique deck, but the problem is, and this is the big caveat, the main reason why you're running a Guildgate deck is you're running Maze's End. And eventually, you're going to realize that the best way to make a Maze's End deck is to just ramp a lot and then cast Scapeshift, and then cheat your Guild Gates into play, and then you just win with Maze's End with like an Amulet of Vigor or whatever it is. And the deck becomes very, very linear. All you want to do is ramp really hard, and then tutor up your Scapeshift, and then win the game with Maze's End. You do that over and over again. Every single game ends up going the exact same way, because if you deviate from that, people are just going to disrupt your Maze's End, and you're going to cry and you're going to be sad. So every single Maze's End deck, my deck included, every single one that I've ever seen, is always just a Scapeshift deck. That's all it is. And it's not for me. I don't like really linear decks. Some people really like it, so I don't want to bash on it, but it was not for me. So as soon as my deck turned into a Scapeshift deck, I took it apart and I never played it again.
Speaking of these cards don't really change that, right? Like, they're good additions, but it's nothing that is gonna make the deck really play differently. Like, you get some removal, maybe some more consistency, but you're still gonna be essentially the same deck you were talking about.
Yeah. And these cards are great for the Guildgate deck, and you don't have to build it as a you can even not run Maze's End, and you can still have a great Guildgate deck. There's a lot of like gate synergies at this point that you could run that are really fun and casual. You could take out Maze's End entirely and not deal with it at all, and it would be great. And that's why I wanted to mention these cards, because these cards are great. They're great for just a nice Guildgate deck. They don't really change the Scapeshift deck, but I have to give it some props. And also, likely we're going to see more Guildgates support in the next coming set, War of the Spark. So, I mean, you could start picking up the cards. It's a fun archetype. These 3 cards are fantastic. Gates Ablaze is just like a really good undercosted board wipe for the Guildgate deck. And it's also going to be super budget friendly. Plaza of Harmony is also going to be an automatic staple. It's not quite a City of Brass for the deck, but it's close. And Omen the Gates is probably the weakest of the 3, but it's still fine. It's still good. And it's good. These are good cards, Seth. They're nice. And I'm just sad.
I think that's maybe the problem with the Gate deck is, apart from Maze's End, there's some payoffs, but they're mostly more like limited focus cards that aren't necessarily commander power level payoffs, I think is the problem. So you can play, like, they have these random Colossuses and flyers that get bigger for each gate you control, but those are cards that, while they're fun and limited, don't necessarily have the power level to close out 4-player commander games.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll get another non-Maze's End payoff that really isn't the linear combo payoff, but still is powerful enough to make the deck at least like semi-competitive in Commander.
I hope so. Like a 5-color commander that gives your creatures +1/+1 for each gate you control. That would be really fun, I think, in Commander. Something like that, promoting a very different style of win condition would be great. But yeah, and again, if you like Maze's End, go for it. It's a strong deck. And I don't mean to be that mean about it, but it's just not for me. That's it. That was my rant.
All right,
I was the Maze's End player before, and I took it apart.
Let's move on to number 8 before Tomer angers all the Maze's End players in our audience.
How did we get here?
Number 8. This card I was kind of surprised to find on the list. Font of Agonies, the new kind of weird payoff for paying life, essentially. You can blow up a lot of creatures if you pay a lot of life. The first thing I thought of was your is it Selenia Dark Angel deck that you played one time a long time ago? It seems like it's pretty easy to power it up in that deck. What are you planning on doing with it, Tomer?
Well, that's 100%. That was the first thing I thought. I was like, this is an auto include for the Selenia Dark Angel deck. It's one of my, it's my favorite Orzhov deck, and I just love it so much. So obviously, Selenia is all about life manipulation, or she has an instant speed activated ability that you can just like pay 1 life and return her back to your hand. And it's not about returning her back to your hand. It's all about just like manipulating your life total so you can get it down to like, get it down to 1 so you can win with like near death experience and do a bunch of other shenanigans, or the life swap cards too as well are really fun with her. So in a Selenia deck, Font of Agony is a new staple card. It's a 1 mana spell. As soon as you pay like 4 or more life, you get a repeatable like creature removal spell at instant speed, which is insane. But Black in general just has a lot of really powerful staple cards that require you to pay life. So, for example, Greed effects, Erebos, God of the Dead, Greed itself, Necropotence is a card that I think some people are aware of that also requires paying of life. Other Orzhov commanders as well, like Vona, Butcher of Magan, is also like pay 7 to destroy a target. So as long as your deck has like a consistent amount of paying life cards, Font of Agony is going to be a real house. And also, if you're in an Orzhov deck and you're running Aetherflux Reservoir, that's kind of hilarious too. You pay 50 life to deal 50 damage, and then you get 50 blood counters, and then you're basically set. You're paying 2 mana to destroy a creature whenever you want until the enchantment's gone.
Yeah, you just have like infinite Doom Blades, essentially. Or even better, because you can destroy black creatures. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess, I mean, with all those cards you mentioned, and Doom Whisperers, and just Black's theme of playing life, maybe there's more homes for this than I actually thought at first glance. How much do you think you need? Like, can you just be a Black deck with, like, the Necropotence, also Erebos, and, I don't know, Argul's Bloodfast? Can you have, like, 5 or 10 of those type of effects in your deck and make this work? Or do you have to be more built around the life manipulation, life loss thing to really want Font of Agony in your deck?
I think if you have, like, a couple, just like 5 or so, like you said, cards that are like Greed effects or Snuff Out or Necropotence and stuff like that. If you have like 5 of those cards, I think Font of Agonies is worth a slot. It's just 1 black mana to cast, right? So you're investing 1 card and 1 black mana to put this on the battlefield, and if it kills like 2 creatures over the course of the game, it's pretty good. It's also not restricted to colors or anything, what creature it does. It's not like non-black creatures or anything like that. It can kill any, and it's instant speed, and it's just 2 mana down to do that. It's a really powerful effect. So I think if you kill 2 things consistently per game with Font of Agonies, it's worth it.
Let's move on to a card at number 7 on our list that I expect will be coming into play under my control in the near future. Our Rakdos Mythic Captive Audience. You know that you're targeting me with this, right? And I'm also, if I play this card, I'm targeting you. We know that's how it's going. How good is this card, Tomer? Like, how much of an impact does this have on a game of Commander?
So, I don't know how great this card is power level wise. I mean, it's a 7 mana enchantment that might not even do anything if it's removed before the opponent's upkeep. So that's not a great start, but it's really about sending a message. And the card is, it is good. It's just not like insane or anything. It's really about just like tying your opponents down to a train track, and a train is coming, and then the opponent is like, well, what can I can draw out of this, right? I could draw a disenchant in time. It's fine. So the first upkeep comes, they're probably going to pick the zombie creature token thing because that doesn't immediately harm them in any way. So each opponent now has 5 zombie creature tokens. You draw a card, it's not a disenchant. It's not a way to get rid of it. You're going to start pleading with your opponents as a train. You hear the sound of the train coming by. You're not really sure if it's on your track or on a different track. You know, maybe you'll draw a way out of this somehow, or maybe you could convince an opponent, and then it's the next upkeep. And then either you have to discard your hand Command, which is awful in Commander because that means you're definitely on the losing end. Or your life total becomes 4, which again is really bad in general, but especially when your opponents have zombie creature tokens, that could kill you. So again, it's like it's just like every single upkeep becomes worse and worse for you, and it's just like that inevitability and the fact that the card is staying on the battlefield right in front of you, so you could always read it. It's like one thing to kill somebody out of nowhere because it's like unexpected, you know. It just happens. You feel like that harshness of losing right off in the middle of nowhere. But then you kind of move on with your life. But this is kind of like the escalating dread. And I can imagine like your face kind of mirroring the faces on the card artwork too. It's just like, oh, this is not happening. I can't believe it's happening. Oh my God, it's going to be my upkeep. Oh no, this happened. Oh no, the next one is going to be worse. Oh no, the next one is going to be worse. Oh, it's so good. I can't wait to give you this.
Oh, thanks, Tomer. It is such a sweet card, though. It's just such a cool design, and it really feels like if you have to choose twice, you probably just lose. Like, I think maybe you could survive the first one, especially if you have, like, Wrath or something. It is a lot of power. Like, in a 4-player game, if all your opponents are still in it, that's 30 power of zombies being created, which that is a lot of zombies, but in theory you can survive that. But once you go to 4, in Commander you start with 40 life. From 4 to 40, that's a lot of life being lost. And you know that the last one you choose is discard your hand, because it's kind of like the card draw thing, where you want to draw cards and discarding your hand is like the opposite of that. So even if I'm going to die to a Boros Charm or something, I'm going to 4 life before I discard my hand. But it seems just like I just love these designs. They're really fun and add a really interesting kind of like political element to games. And I don't know, like, hopefully you could deal with it if you're being enchanted with it right away or after the zombies come. But it just adds such a really fun, cool aspect to the game. So
yeah, it could be just that I cast this for 7 mana, hand it over to you, and you immediately have a response in your hand, you know? So, and the card does absolutely nothing for 7 mana. That is the worst case scenario. But just the fact that it could go all the way, and every single step is just more and more agony, and it's right there as like a persistent reminder of what's to come. Ooh, it's beautiful. And it was clearly made for multiplayer, right? Like, I don't think this was designed for like standard or limited in mind. It's just, this is a Commander card, and it's just like a sign that's like Wizards of the Coast is really pushing Commander in the best way in all the formats.
Well, let's move on to number 6 on our list. We have another enchantment, but this one is a tiny bit cheaper and a little bit more aggressive. Rhythm of the Wild, our new like Fires of Yavimaya type effect. So Tomer, what are you more excited about as far as the abilities on this card? Is it a staple in Commander because your stuff isn't getting countered, or is it the riot aspect where you can put stuff into play with haste and potentially put counters on them as well? But what part of this card is most exciting for Commander?
I think the biggest draw is the fact that you're giving all your non-token creatures riot, just because that's something you can yourself build around in your deck. Whereas whether or not your spells are being countered really depends on who you're playing against, and that you don't really have control of in the deck building process. So I'm going to be playing, if I'm running Rhythm of the Wild, I'm definitely running it because I want to give my creatures riot. And it's basically baseline Fires of Yavimaya is the baseline. This is just like better, just significantly better in any deck that isn't a token deck. Any deck that isn't a token deck, this Rhythm of the Wild effect, the ability to give your creatures riot over haste is just strictly better. Because you get to choose. Like, if you already have a haste effect, then boom, all your creatures have +1/+1 counters on them. Or if you're in a +1/+1 counter deck, then you just have a free source of adding extra counters to all the creatures that enter the battlefield. And then on top of that, yes, this is a great card for when you do sit across the table from a blue player and all their counters are blank. So they have to either respond with this innocent looking 3 mana enchantment, or they're going to have a rough time dealing with your cards. So it's great.
The other part that I'm excited about, and I think it's obviously really fine and good played fairly, but there's also some sweet combo-esque stuff you can do with the +1/+1 counter, especially if you get into like Teamer in specific, where you can have like infinite Glenelender Archmages, because you can sack it and it comes back into play, and the -1/-1 counter goes away, or like Kitchen Finks with a sack outlet, infinite damage combos with Murderous Redcap. So you can build like a creaturey Teamer style deck, or even Jund style deck, that not only takes advantage of this just being a good fair card, but can also do some sweet kind of synergistic combo shenanigans too.
Yeah, I never thought about the combo aspect. It does synergize really well with Persist and a sack outlet, so that could be a real thing. Like you said, like Teamer or a Jund, you run this, it's a good engine for giving your creatures haste primarily, also good, incidentally, at stopping blue players, but then you just later on in the game, boom, you just combo off.
Yeah,
win.
Yeah, I like it because you don't really have to build a combo deck. Like Glenelender Archmage, Kitchen Finks, those are relatively fine cards anyway, and sack outlets are already like a thing people do in Commander. So you can kind of just like play a normal creaturey mid-rangey deck and have this like backdoor, oops, I accidentally drew the right cards, I get to go infinite type of combo build in, so.
Wow, this enchantment just got even better. I expect this card to be played a lot.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty good. It's definitely a powerful effect. Well, let's move into our top 5, and I'm a little surprised that our number 5 card is not higher on the list, because I feel like this is maybe, in my opinion, the most busted Commander from the set. What do you think, Tober? Where does Prime Speaker Vannifar fit in the Commander format, and just how insanely good is it as your Commander?
So I totally agree. This is by far the best Commander in terms of power level from the set. And I think it's a really incredibly powerful Commander. It's going to be, it's definitely the most competitive one we've seen in quite a while. That said, I don't like it. That's why I didn't put it higher.
Not a
because
fan?
This is like Tober's favorite, like most hyped cards. And I had to put Prime Speaker in here because I kind of felt obligated to, but I don't like the card. Remember when I said about the Guild Gates and Maze's End and linear decks? Prime Speaker Vannifar is the ultimate version of a linear deck. It basically, like, Prime Speaker basically says, oh, you can fetch any creature of this converted mana cost. So you have all the deck building options. And that's true. You could build Prime Speaker a billion different ways. But when it comes down to it, 99.99% of the Prime Speaker decks are all going to be the exact same, because there's going to be an optimal card that you want to tutor for with every single time you tap her for activated ability. So there's always going to be a 1 converted mana cost creature you're going to get, and you have like a backup in case of some sort of situation. And the same thing with 2 converted mana cost, 3 converted mana cost, 4 converted mana cost. It is a combo deck. Prime Speaker is definitely a combo deck. All you want to do with her is you want to activate her ability as many times as possible in one turn so you can win the game. You use abilities like Thornbite Staff, which is an equipment that lets you untap the quick creature whenever a creature dies. So obviously you get infinite taps like that. Intruder Alarm also untaps all your creatures as soon as a new creature enters the battlefield on your control. Again, you just use her ability to bring a creature onto the battlefield, and you automatically untap that way too. There's a bunch of creatures as well that untap creatures. There's I forget, there's like a symbiote or something that untaps an elf, and she is an elf, including she's an elf who's wizard. So there's the synergies there.
Scrib Ranger, Deceiver Exarch, Breaching Hippocamp. Is there a I win the game combo? Like, I've focused on this card in Modern and also in Standard, as far as like finding loops where if you activate Prime Speaker once, like if you untap with it and it's not summoning sick, and you have any one other creature on the battlefield, you should be able to like loop through your deck to win the game. Is that something you can do in just the Simek colors? Because I know you're like, the most common ways in like Modern are like Kiki Jiki is the most common thing you're like looping towards with like Restoration Angel or something. Or are you looking for just like mass value with your untapping, and eventually you build a huge board, give everything haste, and win that way?
So I'm like 100%, 99.99% certain there is a like infinite combo that Ares is going to be doing. I think it involves like just a whole bunch of creatures, and then you just Crater Hoof and win with a giant creature. but offhand right now as we're recording,
yeah,
can't think of the combo. But I do know that Jumbo Commander made a deck tech on Prime Speaker Vannifar. I think Wedge also made a deck tech on Prime Speaker Vannifar, and I'm pretty sure they went over all the combos very extensively there. So if you are interested in running and building her, I would check out those videos first. And yeah, I'm like 99% sure there's just like infinite. As soon as like Prime Speaker is allowed to untap and use her ability, I think you just win.
So the other problem with this card, and it's going to get you killed. Like, and at least for me, if I know everything we're talking about Prime Speaker, I'm expecting if the Prime Speaker player untaps with Prime Speaker and any other creature on the battlefield, they're going to just win the game. Because that's what you do with Prime Speaker. And you're not going to be able to talk me into, oh, I'm playing it fairly. Like, oh, don't worry, I'm playing the fun, kind version of Prime Speaker. No, I'm not going to buy that. So as soon as I see that that's your commander, I'm going to start attacking you. We're trying to make sure that Prime Speaker Vannifar doesn't stick on the battlefield, or getting rid of anything that gives haste so you can win out of the blue. So I think it's going to draw a lot of hate from your command zone right from the start of the game, because I think people are going to know, like, this is a commander that just kills everyone if you get to untap with it.
Yeah, it's not a deck that you can go just halfway with. You play her the most competitive possible, or you just lose the game because people know of the lists that are the most competitive possible. So I don't know how competitive she is, like in the competitive EDH community. I know Yisun Wanderer Bard is very similar to her. You do have access to blue, but she is a 1 mana cost more expensive, so I don't know where she ends up there, but she is definitely a very competitive commander. And if you are looking for a more casual version of Prime Speaker Vannifar, I highly recommend just building another Simek deck.
Yeah.
Like run Experiment Craj, run like Vorel or something like that. Something that won't immediately get you hit out of the game just for revealing what commander it is. And it's so weird because like everybody loves this card. Everybody loves this card, and there's a lot to love. She's really powerful. She's a really unique style of deck. She's Birthing Pod. People love Birthing Pod, and you can't play it in Modern anymore. So now you can play it in Commander. Huzzah! And I'm just like poo-pooing it. So I'm sorry, but like, yeah, I personally do not like linear decks. A lot of people do, and that's fine. I just don't, and I just see Prime Speaker Vannifar just playing out every single time the same way. So.
Well, let's move on from some cards Tomer doesn't like to some ones that he presumably does like. We got another cheat sheet here. We are talking with number 4 at our list. +1/+1 counter shenanigans, I guess. Simek counters. Tomer, explain why we have all these cards right now. What is the theme of these cards, and what are you doing with them?
So, the +1/+1 counter archetype has a long and rich history in Commander, mostly because basically every set or every other set at minimum has a +1/+1 counter theme. It's just like throughout Magic the Gathering's history, that's what we get every single time. So there's a lot of cards to work with. The archetype is really good, really diverse. You could play it in so many different colors, so many different color combinations. It's great. There's a lot of ways you can build a +1/+1 counter deck. I love it. And we just got like a whole bunch of extra cards because Simek is all about +1/+1 counters. So we just ended up picking up a whole bunch of sweet new inclusions to the archetype. And these 4 are just my 4 favorite that we got. I think Simek Ascendancy is the best of the best. It's a new alternate win condition. It seems really easy to get 20 growth counters on it. You basically just have like Chasm Skulker or Toothy Imaginary Friend, and you just like draw a whole bunch of cards, maybe like a couple windfall effects, and put a whole bunch of counters on Chasm Skulker or Toothy, and you'll get to 20 pretty quick. There's also like Forgotten Ancient that gets a +1/+ counter on it every single time anyone casts a spell. I think there's like a Hydra that does a similar thing.
Managorger Hydra is the same, I think.
Yeah, so like you play one of those things and you have Simek Ascendancy on the battlefield, you'll get to 20 really fast. And then that's not even counting like combos. I'm sure there's tons of combos to make infinite +1/+1 counters as well. Like your mentioning of the persist and the riot enchantments.
Oh yeah.
So if you're doing something like that, like you're in a teamer, you could do something like that and win the game with Ascendancy. So I think this enchantment's insane. Yeah. And then Incubation Druid is just like insane too. It's a fine mana dork. It's like not that good on turn 2 if you're just tapping it for 1 mana, because we just have so many cards that do exactly that. But you put any +1/+1 counter on it and it taps for 3? That is insane. You don't even need to adapt it. You could like play Rishkar immediately afterwards and put a +1/+1 counter on turn 3, and now it taps for 3 mana on turn 3. There's 100 ways of just like adding like a +1/+1 counter very easily to it. So that's insane. And then Shark the Crab is like mass sleep repeatable. It's great. And it's a fish octopus crab. And Benthic Biomancer is like a repeatable free loot engine that you don't even need to tap for just 1 mana. Is great. It's probably great in the Kumena deck, the Merfolk Kumena decks. So yeah, I'm really happy with all of these.
Yeah, I think the ranking is pretty much the same for me. Simek Ascendancy, like you said, it seems really easy to get 20 counters on it in Commander. And then it's also in blue, so it's also pretty easy if you want to go a little more spiky to potentially do that and just take an extra turn so you don't give everyone a turn before your upkeep to disrupt your Simek Ascendancy plan. And then Incubation Druid is another one. There's so many incidental ways to put counters on things. When you have a 2-drop that's tapping for 3 mana, that is really powerful ramp. Even in a format like Commander, which has a lot of powerful ramp options, that is a lot of ramp in a 2-mana package when you have an incidental way to just be tapping it for 3 on turn 3. What do you think of the name Shark to Crab?
I think they know what they did.
Do you feel like with these did they go too far?
Silly?
Did they go too far and too silly with some of the Civic things, or do you find it amusing and fun?
I find it honestly, this is what the people want. Like, at least that's when I look on like the Reddit community and anything. Whenever there's like new Simic cards being displayed, they're like, we want an elf lizard wizard, we want shark crab, we want stupid names, huzzah! So if they are representative of the majority of players, I think that's fine. Yeah. Like, you could just make silly names. It's magic, and don't take it too seriously, I guess. That's how I look at it. Like, it does kind of seem like out of place when you have like Benthic Biomancer, Incubation Druid, like all these, like, they're trying to be sciencey and kind of almost serious about it, and then you have Sharktocrat. clearly not the same designers were all in agreement on how they want to do the naming system on the Simic, but like, I think it's fine.
And I like it. And it does fit Simic as well. So I guess it fits the weird mutant type theme of the guild. So I guess if there's any place where Shark to Crab is probably good, it's probably Simic.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, or like naming it some Latin nomenclature that also just says translate into Sharko Crab, right? Like, that's how we would do it in real life.
All right, let's move on. Number 3 on our list, we got another huge group of cards, but instead of +1/+1 counters, we're talking about death. We're getting serious here in our top 10 countdown.
Oh man, from Shark to Crab to death.
Yes, it's taken a dark turn here in our countdown video. But no, we're talking about Orzhov, kind of like Afterlife, Self-Sacrifice, Tisa Karlov. Tomer, what are you doing with these cards?
So I think all of these cards are just excellent inclusions in the Orzhov Sacrifice archetype, which we have quite a few different options for. Most recently, we've got Kraven Regna. They came in Battle Bond. They're excellent Orzhov Sacrifice decks. They're primarily Sacrifice, but they also have a life gain theme going on and a tokens theme going on. They have a lot going on. And these cards are all excellent inclusions into the deck. Tisa Orzhov Cian? I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say any of these words. Whatever you say,
I
Seth.
say Scion, but
Scion.
You don't want to trust me when it comes to pronunciations.
Tisa Orzhov Sionis. I don't know. Yeah, it's an auto-include. Like, these cards are excellent inclusions there. Isley Eternal Pilgrim is another, like, Orzhov Sacrifice Life Gain deck. These cards are just perfect there. The entire Afterlife mechanic is perfect for these Orzhov decks because they just provide a lot of really good sacrifice bodies in a mana efficient form. So, for example, Administrative Obligation, 3 mana to get 3 sacrifice fodder targets for your sacrifice deck. That is a really good value. Like, you could compare it to like Mausoleum Guard, and that's 4 mana for 3 bodies, and Administrative Obligation is even better than that because it only has 1 toughness, and you could usually think of that as being a disadvantage, but these decks are always running Skull Clamp, so having 1 toughness is actually a benefit. Again, Tithe Taker, 1 toughness, that's a benefit.
Yeah, you're
in a weird way.
That's a lot of Skull Clamp. You're drawing 6 cards with Minister of Obligation. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so these 2 Afterlife cards are my favorites. Seraph of the Scales would be my 3rd favorite, but not enough room on the slide. So Ministering of Obligation, Tithe Taker. Tithe Taker is less efficient. It's just 2 bodies for 2 mana, but it has a really good ability. It's kind of like a Grand Abolisher-ish type thing, but it's really good for 2 mana. And then Priest of Forgotten Gods is an excellent new sacrifice outlet. It doesn't draw as many cards as some other sacrifice outlets, but it also makes them sacrifice a creature, lose 2 life, and you get to ramp a little bit. So I think that's fantastic for any sort of Orzhov deck, really. And then Tisa Karlov, amazing. Death Harmonicon, Necronomicon, Panharmonicon for Death Trinkets. I don't know how you call it. It's great value, and she also supports tokens, which Afterlife creatures all come with. So she's great as part of the 99, and I even wrote a budget commander deck about her as the commander. So I think she's all 4 of these cards are excellent.
Yeah, I think the Afterlife cards, like you said, they're just good value. I'm especially excited about Tisa Karlov, which I love me some Panharmonicon, and I was literally asking for a reverse Panharmonicon a few months ago when someone asked what you wanted to see. So I'm really excited. I think this is the deck that I can't wait to build most for Commander, is just build the Tisa deck. I don't care about the token text on it. I pretend like that doesn't even exist. I just want to double up my death triggers. So I think you could do some really fun things with it. I haven't delved too deep into it, but even just like the Kamigawa Dragons, for example, where you have Kakusho and stuff like that, they're really obvious, easy ways to take advantage of Tisa, and I'm sure there's some combo potential that I haven't gotten to yet. And I think Priest of Forgotten Gods is kind of a big sleeper. I think this card is actually super good in Commander, it's a little matchup dependent, but for sacrificing 2 creatures, which presumably, if you're playing Priest, you want to be sacrificing your stuff anyway, but having each player sack a creature and lose some life is a lot of value for your sacrifice, I think, and you get to draw a card on top of it. So it works really well with things that make your opponent sacrifice creatures when your creatures die. Like, you can kind of turn this into a board wipe with things like Grave Pack style of synergies. So I think that this is actually a really powerful 2-drop.
Yeah, it's not like the second coming of Ashnod's Altar or anything like that, but it's as a creature itself and being able to affect the board when you're sacrificing creatures, and it always does something good. Like, it drains life, it sacrifices creatures, it ramps and draws a card. It doesn't do like anything insane, any one thing insanely, but it does so many things that are good, that are universally good, that it's always like a good sack outlet, always. So, and it's just 2 mana. So I really like it.
Let's move on. Number 2 on our list. We have an enchantment. We've had a lot of enchantments on our list today. I just realized that. Guardian Project. So, Tomer, what do you do with Guardian Project in Commander?
I think you jam it into basically every single green deck that's not a token deck. This is the closest. This is one of the cards that I say is like an insane staple for the deck, for the entire format. Like, I imagine this card is going to be played a whole bunch. Basically every single green deck is going to be very creature focused, and a 4-mana enchantment that's hard to remove, not a creature, hard to remove, that starts drawing you a card every single time a non-token creature enters the battlefield is just insane value. It's like a way better Phyrexian Arena because you can abuse it so much more. You don't have to cast a spell. You don't have to cast a creature. So unlike like Beast Whisper, which is also an excellent 4-mana card draw engine, you don't have to cast it. So it works really well with blink engines like Rune of the Hidden Realm, for example. Any sort of ways you can exile creatures and temporarily return them back to the battlefield. You get extra bonuses off that as well. And the restriction is just like, it doesn't really exist in Commander because we're a singleton format. So the downside is non-existent. It's all upside. And it's clear, I think it was made for Commander as well. This seems fantastic there. Any green deck will run it except for tokens because it doesn't trigger off token triggers.
Yeah, this card,
token creatures.
This card is very good. I think it's fine just as a fair card where I'm a green deck, I got a lot of creatures, I'm going to draw a bunch of cards as I cast my creatures, and then it's also a potential combo engine where you have like your Ashnod's Altar, Grave Crawler type loops where you just keep getting one creature entering the battlefield. Allows you to basically draw your entire deck if you can do loops of that. You mentioned Rune. Same thing I love my like looping, dirtily looping Panharmonicon, Eerie Interlude, getting back your Eternal Witness, blinking everything. You throw Guardian Project into the mix along with also Panharmonicon to double up stuff, and you're just it gets really crazy really, really fast. So this is a card that I expect I will just play in pretty much every green deck that I build from now on. I don't know why you would not play it.
Yeah, unless you're a heavy token deck where you're just not playing a lot of creatures that aren't tokens, or you're in some sort of green deck that doesn't play a lot of creatures, which is definitely a minority. I expect the Guardian Project to just be an easy include in basically every green deck. It's going to be best. You're going to draw the most cards. Again, if you're comboing off, like you said, like just doing like infinite loops with sacrificing or infinite blink loops, then you can draw your entire deck with Guardian Project. It's also going to be really good against for any deck that has a low curve for creatures. So any like Elf Ball deck, any like Edric decks, Animar Soul of Elements decks, you're just going to be drawing like 10 cards a turn, and it's going to be nutty. Also, any ways to cheat out creatures like Gishath Sun's Avatar's attack trigger. When you deal damage, you just like take all the dinosaurs from the top of your library and you just shove them into the battlefield, and now you're drawing a card off each one. So it's hard to think of decks that it's not good in. I would think like Tristani decks probably might not run this, and that's about it.
Well, speaking of cards that it's hard to think of situations where they're not good, we've reached number 1, and we kind of hyped this going into our list. This is oh my god, I think this is the best white card ever printed. Smothering Tithe. So, Tomer, you like this card a little bit. Why don't you explain why Smothering Tithe is so good and important in Commander?
It's the best white card that's been printed in years for Commander. 100%. I like it more than Teferi's Protection, and I loved Teferi's Protection. Still love Teferi's Protection, but I loved it back then too. Smothering Tithe. Woo! So white has had issues in Commander, some recurring things. One being just like good sources of a card draw that aren't stuck to like to toughness, like Mentor of the Meek, and another being tutors, and another being ramp. And ramp was a big sticking point. There wasn't a lot of good ramp options. There was like Knight of the White Orchid for a 2-drop that gets you planes. There's Mana Rocks. Obviously, everybody has Mana Rocks, so white has access to that. But like, it's very slim pickings. It's very slim pickings in terms of ramp. And here comes Smothering Tithe, and it's so good, Seth. Like, so you cast Smothering Tithe, and then you pass a turn. Like, you cast a turn 4. Who's gonna pay 2 mana when they draw a card, their first card they draw on a turn, before they even like get to their first main phase or anything? Are they really going to pay 2 mana to stop you from making a treasure token? No, there's no way. There's no way. You get a free treasure token for most of the game unless your opponent has like more mana than they can deal with. Like if you're up against like Nikia of the Old Ways, or like some really like crazy land ramp deck like Tatyova, and they've already like generated infinite mana, then sure, yes, they will start paying for the cost. But any other situation, 99% of the time, they're going to let you make a token for free. So you cast Smothering Tithe, and then boom, you have 3 opponents in a typical 4-player game. Each one is going to give you minimum 1 token. So when it goes back to your turn after you cast Smothering Tithe, it's already 3 mana of any color. That's already like Thran Dynamo level of goodness. It's actually a Gilded Lotus, essentially. It's like a 4-mana Gilded Lotus because you can use that mana to tap for any, to make it any sort of colors. So it's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's already on level 3 Dynamo and a cheaper Gilded Lotus. Just at the minimum level, at the very minimum level, but it gets so much better, Seth. It gets so much better because the best thing in Commander is obviously drawing cards. Everybody's going to be drawing cards. And so when your opponents are going to be drawing cards, are they going to pay 2 mana for each card they draw? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, Seth. So like, more realistically, minimum you're going to get 3 mana each turn off this. Realistically, you're going to get like 6.
Yeah,
at least.
I mean, your opponent casts a Brainstorm, and that's 3 treasures for you, or any of the million of card draw effects that are on the floor. I think the power of this card, and we didn't even really get into yet, artifact synergies. If you have cranial platings or other, like, you want a lot of artifacts on the battlefield for some reason, it's insane there. Revel in Riches, I don't even know any way to abuse having treasures. But the thing that makes this card so powerful is it's kind of like the white Rhystic Studies, except a treasure is so non-threatening. Like, drawing a card with Rhystic Studies, that you're actually like, oh, okay, they could draw something that would maybe, like, kill my thing. What if they draw their combo piece? With Smothering Tithe, it's just a treasure. Like, it's 1 mana. It's a treasure. I'm not going to give you 2 of my mana to keep you from getting 1 silly treasure token. It's just a treasure token. So no one's going to pay for it. And then all of a sudden, you're going to, like you said, be making 6 mana a turn, 8 mana a turn, and just having an absurd amount of mana. So, oh man, this card, it's so absurd.
I would argue, Seth, that Smothering Tithe is actually way better than Rhystic Study. Not just better, way better than Rhystic Study for white, especially.
And that's
because
coming from someone who really loves to draw cards, almost as much as me. Maybe as much as me.
Oh my goodness. Rhystic Study is one of my favorite cards. I like it almost as much as I like Mystic Remora. But yeah, Rhystic Studies, amazing card draw engine, amazing tax effect. But people are going to, like, have the mana available to pay 1. Paying 2, though, double the mana, that makes all the difference. And I think a lot of people won't be able to, like, you could pay 2 on your turn and go significantly behind, but then you're winning anyway. The person with Smothering Tithe is winning anyway because they're putting you back so far. But the reason why it's so good in white is because white's best cards happen to be cards a lot of people don't like playing. Armageddon effects, for example. So if you deprive everybody of mana, including yourself, your opponents definitely cannot pay 2 mana to draw a card once all their lands have been destroyed via Armageddon effects. And then when it comes down to your turn, you have all the mana in the world. You're fine casting all your spells because you have all these treasure tokens. So it's really...
I hope Vince is not listening to this video. Vince, hopefully you turned the headset off 30 seconds ago. Don't listen to this.
Yeah, don't give him ideas. I think he knows. I think he knows.
2 questions for you, Tomer. Number 1, is there any white deck that doesn't want this? Or is this literally just like top 10 white card in Commander? You play it in essentially every deck.
People are saying, oh, you don't run it in green decks. You don't run it in Selesnya decks because you have Cultivate and stuff. I'm like, well, I'm just going to run it anyway. So green is the only one where it's like, you can make a case for not running Smothering Tithe, but any non-green deck, you're running it. Absolutely. And also, if you're in a Selesnya deck and you're running tokens, this is an auto-include. Because if you run any tokens deck, you're going to be running all the classic token doublers, like Anointed Procession, for example, Parallel Lives, Doubling Seasons. Those are all staples in a token deck. Smothering Tithe makes tokens. They're artifact tokens. So you double up the amount of tokens you're making with Smothering Tithe in a token deck. So if you're in any sort of Selesnya deck that is a token deck, you're running Smothering Tithe anyway, no matter what. And as you also said, artifact decks are insane with this. Like Brea, Ethereum Shaper, can just sacrifice these treasure tokens to do a whole bunch of nonsense effects. Goblin Welder, you can sacrifice this token to get back like your Blightsteel Colossus from your graveyard or whatever. I don't know. Just silly things. Revel in Riches counts your treasure tokens. This makes you 1 billion treasure tokens. Insane. So this deck, Yeah, this card is crazy. Oh, wheel effects, by the way. If you do like a windfall or a Wheel of Fortune effect, everybody draws 7 cards or whatever number of cards. So you're making 1 billion treasure tokens. It's just so easy to abuse.
That's like combo kill with Revel in Riches. And there's, oh man. Yeah, the card.
So easy to abuse.
Oh, I can't even imagine the wheel that you're getting. Oh, so much combo potential. You're going to get like 20 mana from your 3 mana wheel. And you could be doing this, on like turn 4, turn 5? That's, oh man, this card, it's so busted. It is so busted.
So busted. It's like, worst case, it's a Thran Dynamo, which is one of the best mana rocks. Best case, or middle case, normal case, it's like the best mana rock that you've ever made. And then best case is like you're just fueling it to win the game. Easy peasy. All this for like an innocent looking 4 mana spell. And also the design on it it's beautiful. It's on point. This is the exact way White wants to make ramp. It's a home run in every single aspect of it. Get your copies now, folks.
Especially your foils.
Especially your foils.
Anyway.
Hashtag Saffron off all of effects.
This is the Tomer effect. This is your list. I'm not taking. I'll take the blame for mispronunciations. If Smothering Tithe spikes, you're taking the blame.
Okay, I'll gladly.
Anyway, everyone, I think that does it for today. So, Tomer, before we wrap up, any other final thoughts on anything on the way out the door today?
Ravnica Allegiance, really good for Commander. We got at least 2 staples, Commander staples, Smothering Tithe and Guardian Project. I would also make the case for Rhythm of the Wild is going to be played heavily as well. Orzhov Sacrifice decks got a lot of sweet cards. Simek Simic +1/+1 counter decks got a lot of sweet cards. I'm really happy. We got some good commanders as well. Prime Speaker Vannifar is a new, very competitive commander for folks who like that. I got Nikia that I'm going to be building around. I've already built around Tisa. So, yeah. I'm really happy about it. What about you, Seth? How are you liking it?
I am super excited. I can't wait for Commander Clash to start back up next season to start playing some of these cards. And there's so much stuff we left off. Like Rakdos is a really cool build around Commander for demons and imps and devils. And there's a lot of legends in the set, and it's just great. I'm super hyped for it. It's gonna be a ton of fun to play with. Like you said, we got staples, we got support cards, we got new commanders, we have captive audience to just stick it to whoever we're not liking at the time. So it seems like a great commander set, and I'm super excited to try it out. And speaking of trying it out, gonna slide in a super quick reminder. We are doing a live Commander Clash on the 26th of January, Commander Clash Live. So if you want to potentially see some new cards, I know we got new Commander 2018 cards as well on Magic Online. I know at least one of us is building around a Ravnica Allegiance commander, and that person's probably going to die first, and I tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. But I mean, Vince.
Somebody, Vince. It's Vince. Vince is picking Prime Speaker Vannifar.
Yes, Vince is picking Prime Speaker Vannifar, and he knows we're going to try to kill him first, but he's probably going to just combo off and kill all of us. So it should be...
He'll complain about it all the way through.
It should be interesting. So anyway, if you want some Commander Clash action between seasons, January 26th, it's a Saturday, 2 Eastern time. Check it out. Anyway, everyone, Tomer, thanks for doing it. It's always one of the most fun videos of the year. Definitely appreciate you hanging out.
Thanks for having me. And also, one more plug. I did a full review of all the Ravnica Allegiance cards for Commander, including a whole bunch of other cards we didn't list over here. So if you're looking for a more in-depth review and a bunch of other cards that haven't been touched upon in this video, check out the articles. Yes,
I will link those in the description box. So definitely check out Tomer's full breakdowns. And Tomer, you're also doing some budget Commander with these cards. You mentioned Tisa. What else is coming up soon as far as budget Commander with Ravnica Allegiance?
Next one is Nikia of the Old Ways, so it should be out the week that this video is coming out.
It might already be out by the time this goes up, or around the same time. If it's out, I'll link that as well. So check out the description box for more sweet Tomer Commander action. So thanks for listening, everyone. Again, Tomer, thanks for hanging out. And I think that does it for our top 10 Commander cards from Ravnica Allegiance. So until next set, have a wonderful week, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.
We kept it under 30 minutes, right?
59:51.
Perfect. Close enough.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.